Hi, my name is Stuart Leask, owner and operator of Leaskspec, and behind me is an example of a car that you probably don't see inside of my shop too often. In fact, I guess that's worded incorrectly. It's a car that I don't see inside of my shop too often. This is a Porsche 930. You could probably catch me up on the details because quite honestly, this isn't really my ballpark, but the job at hand is custom fabrication and AC components, and that is a little bit more in my ballpark. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be getting rid of the car's original condensers, which are in the front end underneath the car. And we're going to, at least I believe underneath the car, I haven't actually taken a look. We're going to be adding aftermarket condensers to work with, I believe it is a Prius compressor. The compressor has already been installed at the previous shop and it's set up and it's ready to go. I will be adding the condensers, ducting them, and making sure that they're safe from rocks and debris and things like that. So what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be utilizing the front vents of the rear quarter panels. Those will be the fresh air inlets for the condensers. I'm actually going to force feed them instead of exit air feed them. And I'm going to duct them to the vents, and then I'm going to make sure that anywhere that might be exposed to rocks, debris, etc., has stainless mesh backing and everything else needed to kind of keep this as a safe road car. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get the car on the lift and show you guys what it is that I'm working with and what this project's going to entail.
So off camera, I had a chance to kind of take a look under the car and pre-fit the condensers where I had originally planned, and they were not going to work. So I'm going to go over some of the existing components that were installed on the car previously. This is the first of two condensers, and it was self-tapper screwed into the bottom of the floor with the lines feeding where I assume the original dryer was right there, and then lines running through the driver's side wheel well feeding into what I assume is the new condenser. And you can kind of see me roughly showing where I'm planning on placing the new condensers. This is the existing unit. It was double stacked probably for more surface area, but it was found to be insufficient. These oil lines are going to be an issue with my second condenser placement, but we've already thought of a game plan for that. We're going to have to undo them in these fittings right here and remove the 12-inch horns and then run new oil lines.
Now going back to my previous point, I had talked a little bit about the mounting situation, and I had actually made a couple of videos on this showing some of my thought process as I went through it. Unfortunately, that video ended up being, I think it just got corrupt or something like that. It won't work in our editor. Anyways, long story short, whenever you're mounting something like this, as you can see, it's off kilter. It sits at an angle. This is for a reason because there's very tight fitment in some of these areas. It's obviously angled in, and this is, again, very specifically angled in because there is a lot of clearance issues up front. It gets very close to the backside of the support bar. There's a lot of things that it has to contend with and work around. And it's the same thing on the other side. So when trying to do this, I start with one side. In this instance, I actually started with the driver's side. I set the condenser, I mount it, and I kind of suspend it with zip ties or some sort of temporary structure. And then I know I have 3 tabs that I have to make a mount for. I got tab 1, tab 2, and then tab 3 is hidden up inside. In relation to these tabs, the chassis is going to be off by a pretty decent amount, and the distance between some of them is rather large. This one's a little bit short, but ultimately this is a rather large distant mount. I don't like using strap, A, because it's flimsy over this distance, B, I just don't like the look of it. The second part is I find that the tubing is a bit more rigid while still remaining remotely lightweight. This is just very thin wall, 1/2-inch steel tubing. It doesn't cost me anything to go grab it from the steel supply store. It's very light in weight and it's very strong, and it also makes for a very aesthetic mount unit. So I find a part of the body that I can match the curvature to. I use a couple of nutserts, and then I just do these small little cups on the mounting flange. And then basically with general fabrication techniques, you can just kind of cope this tube to work between these two surfaces. Sometimes this process will take a little bit of time, but in my opinion, what I find is that it gives me the greatest flexibility when it comes to mounting on two two structures that are very far from being on the same plane. At least this is my opinion, this is how I see it, and this is what gets me the quickest workflow. So it saves the customer money, and it ends up being a very sturdy product, as you can see. that condenser does not want to move anywhere. And I did the same thing here. I put a nutsert in the backside of this aftermarket headlight bucket, and then I just did these 2 points. And then by this point, actually, this condenser was pretty solid, but I did a third one at the front that you're never gonna see because it's absolutely buried. But for now, step 1 is complete, and that is the dual condenser setup on the Porsche.
So now that both of the condensers are set up as symmetrical as possible, what I do is I kind of take some rough cuts of aluminum that are just about the final shape of what I think the ducting is going to end up at, and then I start finishing off the rest of it with good old CAD. I'm kind of displaying here one of the constraints that I'm dealing with, which is the rotating fitting that's coming out of the condenser, and also how I plan on cupping around the front and capturing the most air from the grill that I possibly can. Then after I realize I'm happy with the shape of all of the rough pieces, I tack them together and I start melting everything in. And instead of letting you guys listen to the sweet, beautiful sound of AC welding, I'm going to overlay this with some music to save your ears. And that concludes most of the welding and the fabrication work required to duct these condensers. It might look a little foolish without the bumper on, but as everything goes back together, you'll kind of see some of the thought process. Right here is an opening that I kind of left for a bumper to slit into. You'll see again once it's installed. You'll see the room that I had with this banjo fittings, very tight tolerance, as well as the bolt for the front mount. Once the bumper is installed, you can kind of see how the deflection shield picks up some of the extra air, and you'll see that I've left this slot. That's to make room for the leg coming off the existing OEM oil cooler that we may or may not be leaving. I'm not sure if we're upgrading. That slot that I referred to earlier is to allow the bumper to sit underneath, and as you can see, we've done our best to make sure that every bit of airflow that comes in through that bumper opening is fed directly into the condenser, both upper and lower.
So what you'll notice is that obviously this is a twin condenser setup. And ultimately the reason for that is there is not enough room on this car. As you can see, the front end is kind of blockaded by the, I guess, frunk, for lack of a better word. I hate that word, to be honest. But the front trunk makes it to where there's no room for an oversized condenser like a standard car. So what we did is we used 2 smaller twin units and broke them up, split them up on side to side. The idea behind it, as I stated before, is that we use all of the inlet space possible on the front bumper. So that would mean this upper one and a good bit of this lower one. And you'll also see that I kind of used a shield to help feed and catch as much from that front lower grille as possible. You'll see that more clear whenever the bumper's installed. And then ultimately, once everything has made its way through the condenser and through the opening in the fan shroud, this upper ducting on top of the fender will take care of moving as much of that air through as possible, helping promote a good pathway of airflow and ultimately preventing any sort of stall in this area right here, which is very common on, well, just about any car. And that's why you see a lot of cars with a smooth exit on the backside to also prevent the stall from this area right here. So there's a lot of advantages to having this vent on top of the fender. I wouldn't necessarily say, obviously, I would go out and install that, especially for the purpose of, jokingly, an AC system. But because it's here and because nothing else is really utilizing it, it gives us a big advantage in this particular situation. And it's also why I loved this spot. And that's a wrap on the Porsche job. So I've kind of detailed some of the fabrication stuff. I've shown you some of the B-roll. I've shown you some of the welding, some of the bending, some of the fitment, some of the time-lapse stuff. If you have any questions or if you have any interest in getting a job like this done, please don't hesitate to contact or reach out to me. My Instagram is @StuartLeask. All the details are going to be listed below at the bottom of this video. Appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and I will make sure that we keep these up to date as regularly as possible. I have a couple more very interesting jobs coming up that are along the same lines as this, and I also have some titanium work coming up for GTRs. So that will namely be the hot pipe setup that I've been talking about, intake setups, the revision of the R33 exhaust, as well as finalization of the R32, 33, and 34 equal length titanium downpipe systems. So I'm excited to share all of that with you guys. We'll have that kind of split up between this part and the mini series that we're doing called Road to GTR Festival. And again, I'll keep everyone up to date with everything and look forward to seeing you at the next video. Thank you very much for watching.